global network. Their listeners hail from over 198 countries and 2.6 million listeners. So today could be a very powerful event with viewership really worldwide. So I want to thank everyone for coming today, for being here in person for this first day of our new season. Kind of a new chapter for the American Petroleum Institute. See, we're pivoting a little bit. We're changing our format to be more of a panel of experts talking about very relevant industry topics, relevant at the moment. We hope you come away with actionable and intelligence and I guess what's the right word for that? But just ways to really improve your own business. We want to make it very practical. All right, so before we go any further, please let me welcome Mr. Jim Cook up from the Oilfield Christian Fellowship to give the invitation for today.
White shot. Stand by tight.
If you would bow your head with me, please, and we will return thanks for this meal. Father God, we just thank you for how you have supplied us with your bountiful harvest. Lord, you've given us positions that we may work in this industry and supply others with the energy that they need. Lord, we thank you and praise you for how you've given us fellowship and you have given us the time and opportunity to join with each other. Look to bless this food.
Thank you, Jim. I want to also put out a special thank you to our sponsor today, Hewlett Packard Enterprises. So thank you very much for sponsoring our first event for the season. And then as the screen is rotating behind me, we have some events I want to share that's coming up in the very near future. You see the first one here, September 23rd, about 10 days, the 3-gun challenge will be in Eagle Lake, Texas. Hit the next slide, please. The golf tournament, a little bit, about a month from now. Good news, the golf tournament is sold out. Better news, we're looking for sponsors. There's always room for additional sponsorship, right? It is America. And they did ask me very specific. They said, we're looking for cooking and beverage sponsors. So if you have a cook team, this golf tournament was made for you. All right, next one, please. The tennis tournament. There is still room to join the tennis tournament held right here in downtown. Please see Mike Sorrentino. Mike, you please stand up. There you go. Mike is like a 5.5 tennis player. He's going to win that tournament. Yeah, so if you want to go play tennis, please go see Mike. The next one, November 10th, we're having a joint meeting with SPE. We are currently scheduled to have Congressman Dan Crenshaw be the speaker. And then the last one I'll mention here, actually there's one more bonus one after this. December 13th, it's the 13th of December. We're gonna change from our normal December general meeting, and we're gonna change that over to be let's call it a holiday evening soiree. We're gonna try to change it up a little bit. It'll be fun, it'll be held downtown here in a kind of a VIP rooftop type lounge. I'm trying to make it sound elegant. It'll be very beautiful, it'll be very elegant. And then the last one, I don't have a slide for it, but we are just putting together the early phases. We're going to have a gala. And it's going to be a gala to benefit our scholarship fund. Our scholarship fund has made about $3 million in donations over the years. And we really like to bring that to the forefront. And we're going to have a gala to celebrate some of the top influencers in the oil and gas industry. And so we're just putting together the finalized details of it. It will be end of January, early February 2023. So lots of info will be coming out about it. We're really excited about it. The organization did this back in the late 80s. So it's been a few odd years since we did it. And I'm really pleased to tell you, we're going to bring that back again. All right, that's all the announcements. So let me introduce our host for this evening. His name is Mark LaCour. Mark is a longtime board member for here at on our board here, the Houston API. He's both the editor-in-chief of the Oil and Gas Global Network, the OGGN, our broadcast partner today, and he's also director at MotoPoint. Over his 25 years in our industry, he's had over 2,200 meetings with probably every oil and gas company that exists. Even my third cousin in Tunisia remembers meeting Mark back in the 1990s. Interesting note about OGGN, they have the top 15, meaning they have all 15 of the top oil and gas podcasts in the world. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way through 15. Without further ado, let me welcome Mark LaCour.
I don't know who made that video up. Man, it's awesome to see everybody here. Thank you very much. Let's get into our panel. I want to introduce our panelists. Panelists, please come on up. So I have Robert Goodwin with National Oil Varco. Robert hit his first drilling with his dad when he was 4 years old. Now he's in charge of Innov's robotic systems, including their hands-free piping. In his spare times, you can find him working on the flux capacitor for his 1981 DeLorean. We have Matt Marcoux with HPE. Matt's been in this industry for over 20 years, heavily focused on enterprise data, AI, machine learning. Then we have Wayno Gouda with HPE. She is also heavily into data analytics and AI, with strong experience around all of the HPE product lines. Which, thank you, HPE. You're also a sponsor of one of our podcasts. I have to throw that out there. And so we're gonna have a discussion today around drilling. Our industry is in the place right now where we need new technologies, new processes to not only meet new government regulations, but to drive efficiencies. The world is in an energy shortage right now, and the only solution is hydrocarbons. So we have to get them out of the ground around the world and get them on the market. We're gonna talk a little bit about that today. So, Robert, first question I want to just kind of run by you. What would happen if we could automatically match the best drilling rig configurations to the projects?
Well, thanks for the question, Mark. It's really, I got two thoughts here. And the first one is,
Robert, you can get a little bit closer to your microphone. There you go.
How's that? Is that better?
Much better.
Well, thanks for the question. I really have two thoughts. It's really about not just matching, as an OEM provider, rigs are important to me, drilling equipment, topside equipment is important to me. But I think about how do we match the rig to the drilling program? For instance, on a rig, there's thousands of tags already on the piece of equipment. We understand what some rotational speeds are, what some pressures are, what temperatures are. And we can monitor that equipment, but how are we correlating and tying that equipment to the actual drilling program? How can you optimize the equipment that you already own and use to say, okay, now I understand how my equipment works, but how does it work when it's optimized and using the data from downhole to really tie the two together? So, if we do that, we can execute and optimize the drilling program to the next level, really, and be more efficient. But then also, are we optimizing the drilling programs to the machines in their design criteria? And I'm going to say two things that we are and we're not. I mean, a lot of the drilling contractors out there, a lot of the offshore guys, a lot of the land guys, they have centers of excellence. They have real-time data monitoring centers. So they're watching what their assets are doing. They're watching what the rigs are doing. But it's here or there, and I like to use Formula One, for example. As a car guy, I spend a lot of time repairing the DeLorean, but as a car guy, I watch Formula One, and I'm at awe with what Formula One does. They're in an environment that has a lot of variables, whether it's rain, whether it's speed, whether it's other competitors, and it's a very fast-paced, intense environment. But beside them is a team of guys that are always analyzing the data. They're always analyzing what the machine can do. And it's not just how fast the machine can do or how fast the race car can go. It's about how fast you can go for the way the race car was designed in the environment that it's placed in. So I kind of look at that and say, let's take tripping operations, for example. We could trip very, very quickly, but if you trip very quickly just for 2 hours, does that mean anything? Okay, can you do it consistently? Is it in with the design parameters of it? So it's about really optimizing, and are we truly using data and this information to optimize what our equipment is doing to the downhole drilling profile?
Yeah, panelists, can you all pull your microphones a little bit closer to you? So, Robert, that is awesome. But I have to ask you, why is it not being done now?
Well, it is being done now in a sense, but there's challenges, and some of the big challenges are obviously the geographical challenges that we have now. Some of the challenge, and I would say we're a conservative industry by nature, and for good reason. And we're independent by nature. And you take drilling crews, even within the same organization, one drilling crew on one rig is different than a drilling crew on another rig. They compete with each other. And so really, they don't talk about the best practices all the time. They don't share all that information because they want to be the best. And so we have these silos of information that even inside our organizations don't get passed on to each other. So it's not allowing us to optimize what we know. And the other thing is, even though we do have tags and we are measuring the data, it's really a question of who owns that data. As an OEM, we make some of the world's best drilling equipment, and we ship it out the door every day from our plants. And sometimes it goes out the door and I don't see it. I don't hear from it again. I don't get feedback. I don't understand how the tool is used. I don't see where it's used. Maybe I get called back for some repair work. Maybe I get called back if there's a warranty issue. But for the most part, unless they pay for a optimization program or a program where we can watch the pieces of equipment and work with them, really who owns the data? So it's a question of, how do we pass that data on, and who owns that data? And I don't think we're unique. We like to think we're alone in this world, but I bet you Matt could tell us in the rest of the industries that there's other people suffering the same data silos, the same unstructuredness to pass this information on.
It's true. I think data being it's a tricky thing. And what we find across all industries is that understanding what the data is and what it means is perhaps the most challenging piece for organizations looking to get started. And a lot of times it's stuck in people's heads. It's those senior crews out on the rigs. They know what it means. They could tell you exactly when this is at a threshold here or it's in this gradient there. They know what that means, or they think they do. And that's where things get tricky. It's understanding what this means across those different scenarios and then taking a step back away from it. Because humans, we have biases, and we have biases when we look at data. We might think it means a certain thing, but when you start to collect data across all of the instances, right, all of the rigs around the world, all of the drill bit temperatures and all of the different conditions, et cetera, and we take that step back and then try to apply meaning, that's when we can start to have patterns. And the key here is not taking people out of jobs, but helping them make the right decision in the right moment, not penalizing them, but helping them make the right decision, guiding them to that right decision based on that collective intelligence. And we see this across every industry. Financial services, their customer base is collecting information in your cell phones. It's hospitals collecting across different departments, across different patients. The same struggles exist across all of these industries. And so having that first understanding of what the data is, where it is, then we can start making decisions on top of that.
You were telling me earlier, you had a great Formula One example, and I like the Formula One example because there are teams of people analyzing data, and to me, that's the perfect case scenario. But, the drilling industry, these are very expensive rigs with multi-millions of dollars of capital expenditure up front. I guess it'd be easy to say you could optimize a well profile and you can optimize a rig if you had a brand new rig every single time, you had brand new equipment every single time, but just financially, that's not doable.
So it's a sort of funny story. I'll try not to name names. So there's a very high profile, highly successful Formula One driver. You might argue that he was the top guy in the world until very recently. And his team was collecting all of this information about him across multiple seasons, multiple races. And in the off season, they started running these analytical models. They brought in a data analyst or a data scientist, someone to take a look at this and say, well, we have full mechanical control over this car. What if for every single race, we could optimize every single turn and have the driver respond to that? Because, they can't remotely drive the car. There's still a human in the cockpit of that car driving it. And so what if we got this particular driver on every turn to do something unique for every race across the season? And so they modeled this out, and they realized they could save over a second a lap by doing this optimization, which in Formula One, at least early on, a second a lap is the race. And so they went to this one particular driver and they said, driver, unnamed driver, if you do this, we've got about 100 different button presses. So you guys are all familiar with these race cars. They're insane, right? We have 100 different combinations that if you push them in a particular order throughout the race, you are guaranteed to win. And he looked at that and he said, well, that sounds great, but I have 1,000 horsepower behind me. It's hot. I brake so hard that tears come out of my eyes, and I'm trying not to run into other drivers. So I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to put 100 buttons. I can't remember. I can't focus. And remember, this is the top driver in the world. And so they ended up negotiating about 20 unique combinations of button presses throughout the race to help him optimize, this tire would brake a certain amount onto this, etc. And so it comes back to the human. It always comes back to the human. Even with data and analytics and data science, we can go so sophisticated. But if the person in that business process we're trying to optimize, in this scenario, the driver, is unwilling to follow that because it's not practical or not possible, doesn't matter. So even downstream, when you've got all the data and you're throwing hundreds of millions at a problem, if you can't optimize the process because the people can't or won't do it, it's sort of all for naught. And so I think as we start looking at some of these advanced use cases, we have to take the human into account, that there are people involved in this process, and we have to incentivize them to want to do these things, share their data, respond to these metrics. Because I think ultimately, especially in an industry like this, it's about having fewer accidents, getting more life out of the equipment, and ultimately extracting resources more profitably. But we cannot take the humans out of the equation. Even I'm a technologist through and through. Even with the best technology in the world, without optimizing for the human process, it's all for naught, Robert.
That's a great point. It really is. The question that needs to be answered is, what is the end goal? What do we want to achieve with this data? How do we want to implement this data? What level are we looking to optimize? What are we looking to change? I mean, data is great. We can get all the data points in the world, but until we analyze it and put it to a practical use case, so that's what we need to do, is understand the direction we want to go, understand the possibilities we could do, and then create a goal and a standard. Maybe one of the other challenges, we don't have a standardized taxonomy for data. How do you collect the data? Particularly, I'll go back to my OEM. We have a lot of high spec pieces of drilling equipment, whether it's a top drive, a mud pump, some drawworks, pipe handling equipment on a rig. But I would like to hope it's all NOV's equipment, but I know it's not. So it may be my top drive, but it may be somebody else's drawworks. It may be somebody else's control system. So now you have multiple suppliers with multiple data systems and multiple control systems. How do you integrate them together, and how do you take these separate data sources and turn it into something that is tangible and useful and acceptable, that ultimately will make money?
Yeah, well, I want to hand it over to Buna because she's the expert on data taxonomies and data architectures. I think that as we look at technology in our organizations, we almost always, and this is across almost every industry, technology is a cost center for us. They're there to help us get visibility, they're help us to process payments, but they're generally perceived as a cost center because, well, frankly, they cost money, right? They cost money to the overall process. They are not value add. And I think it's because a lot of IT teams have really struggled with these questions around how do we make sense of this data? How do we optimize it? And so I think we've got to have a different relation. Again, I'm a technologist. I think having a somewhat different conversation with our technology fellows is going to drive better outcomes where, as Robert said, what are we aiming for? What is the ultimate goal? Is it to save money, increase safety, lower, whatever the case may be? And then let's brainstorm what the technology can do to enable that. And if it's for every byte of data, I want it to, instead of costing me a penny, I want it to somehow make me a penny. But again, we have to understand it. And that's a challenge in and of itself, right?
Agree. Everybody has a data. It's not that data is new to anybody today, but everybody has a data. But how do we grab those golden nuggets out of that data, right? How do I make money out of the data which is already existing? And how do I collect the data from, different geographies? As Robert mentioned, we have across the geography, right? How do I collect the data from different silos and break those silos, make it in a place wherein you have one big chunk of data, and again, I don't want to have a data swarm at one place and, making not usable one, right? So you collect that data, and then how do you process it? How do you make a meaningful insight of it? And how do you make a business out of it, right? And then we have to standardize certain things within here, right? So you have, like, I have a different system and I have a different data. I need to customize, right? One t-shirt size will not fit for everybody. So we have to customize it. We have to make a meaningful insight. We have to bring in the standards. We have to process it and then pass on this data, and whatever the insight we are, grabbing out of it, pass on it to the downstream so that they can also be, utilizing that outcome and have a successful business, right? So it's all about the data and breaking the silos. How do we optimize? What are we doing it? It's all about it. And then with that, I think we can all achieve the success.
The thing that I keep thinking about is, if we use this data, we have this data, can it change the business model? Can it change, how a rig is utilized, how a rig goes to work? It's a very expensive asset. I've heard to restart some of the new drill ships that have been cold stacked, is a $50 to $100 million endeavor taking 12 to 14 months. So you're asking somebody to spend upwards $100 million over 14 months and not get paid for that until it starts turning to the right, starts drilling some holes. I would like to envision a day where, my customers, the drilling contractors, could execute in a different manner on, could they get paid for, the performance of the tools, performance of the top drive, the different sections of the well? Could they get paid at the end of the day when they turn in their logs? They've completed the work. They've done that. We're used to transact it that way right now. So if we do that, how does that change the industry now that you're getting immediately rewarded for the capital outlay that you put out, 6 months ago, 8 months ago? What if I can narrow that window?
Yeah, I think as we look at the corollaries in technology, a lot of technology trends are pay as you go, right? Technology buyers are moving away from large capital purchases to less risk-averse operational purchases. And I think that's starting to infuse in lots and lots of different industries. So when people come and buy technology from us, they don't want to spend $100 million and then sweat those assets down over 5 years. They want to start with a $10,000 project. And then as they grow, we are taking on some mutual risk. And so translating that into this large capital expenditures for equipment, I think we have to tie that back to what are the results. So my customers are only going to spend tens of millions of dollars on technology if it has a meaningful result. And my technology almost always aligns to some project that is either saving money or making money. That's what it almost always is. Now, there's nonprofits. We're in the medical field. It's curing disease and those sorts of things. But there's almost always a specific outcome that people are purchasing this technology for. And when we talk about extraction of resources, there's a specific outcome, right? We want to pull that resource from the earth in a safe and environmentally sensitive way, and then sell it for maximum profit. And so as we look at paying these folks that are out there doing the work, rather than paying them way in arrears, pay them in real time. Well, the only way we can do that is if we know we're going to make money in the real time. And that comes back to visibility. We have to have visibility about the strain on those assets that day. Hey, you know what? You were operating this drill outside of the thresholds. You put more wear and tear on that. That means I'm going to make less money on this today. And so therefore, you're not going to be able to invoice as much because it's costing us more money. Can we start thinking about having those conversations with our operators, with our downstream customers, thinking about how the money moves? So perhaps there's not as much risk upfront, but perhaps there's not as much upside down when you get closer to payment as well. So we're seeing this across all industries, how people are buying not just technology, but capital assets, moving the risk profile necessarily away from that initial large expenditure to elsewhere. And that also allows for ancillary services where there's now other people that can get involved in the process. The person, as you said, who owns the data? Is it you guys? Is it the operator? Is it the upstream? Is it right? Who owns that particular set of data? And not the data itself, but how that data comes together. That's where the value is, that insight that says, no, you are out of thresholds, stop, right? Someone needs to make that decision and they should probably be paid for it. There's a business model there. I don't know exactly what the answers are, but I think there's a business model there, but it requires that broad collection of data from all of those sources and then applying analytics against that across all of those sources and then pushing that intelligence back out where the decisions are being made. Again, it sounds easy when I say it. Matt, sure, just do that. It's not a trivial problem to solve for, but we are seeing this across other industries from advanced Formula One, right, all the way on the really high tech side, down to aircraft manufacturing on the factory floor, slow, steady, but avoid errors. We're seeing this across all industries, Robert.
And also it makes sense, right? So you're going to plan way ahead, right? So if you want to look at, for example, take an instance, right? So my drilling machine, one of the part is going to go bad in few days. If I get to know that beforehand, I could plan my maintenance window better way, right? I can save cost. I can save things. I can make up a lot of things, and I can also check back with the vendor that is that part available for me and by when I can plan it, right? Instead of once it goes down and then start breaking the head and then start thinking of the things and then having a bottleneck, creating all that havoc. Instead of that, you plan the things well ahead, plan your drilling time, what it is going to be, when I can expect this kind of outages. So all this makes up a big story, and then all this leads to a path of success.
It sounds very challenging, but I like it because ultimately is how do we use the data to either reduce our capex or increase our opex. And I really like your idea about who owns this. And I think back to example of looking at assets differently and look at the airline industry, who owns the jet turbines on the engine. I get to travel a lot. I look out and I see these nice big GE turbines or these Rolls-Royce turbines. And the interesting fact I learned is, United doesn't own these. GE owns it, and they have the data. They analyze they analyze what this engine is doing in real time, and they inform United that at your next port of call, we're going to perform this maintenance or we're going to swap this out. I think there's some business models there to, if we understand what it's doing to the well profile, how the equipment interacts, how the rig interacts, could you now get a different pay structure for that, or could your equipment look differently and you just, you're told, okay, now it's time to replace your pumps, or now it's time to replace your top drive, or now it's time to inspect your drill string.
Yeah, what we're seeing the trend being, again, not only with technology purchases, but service delivery. So I don't know if you folks saw this, but BMW in a specific market is going to start charging for heat as a service in the car. So you don't just get heated seats anymore. You have to pay for it as a subscription in a specific market, specific cars. Yeah, I know it's outrageous, isn't it? But someone decided that was a way for them to monetize something that's in that vehicle. And so as we think about applying this to other industries, airlines, is it thrust as a service from GE providing that service back to United Airlines? Or is it the operator providing petroleum as a service? Hey, I am going to get you this particular outcome. You are getting a resource that you can then sell. I'm taking the risk on. You pay nothing, but I'm taking the risk on. But the premium for that, there's always a premium, right? The only way this makes sense is if there's a premium on the price of that. Because again, as I said earlier, we're shifting the risk profile further downstream, spreading it out, allowing more people to get in on this particular action. And again, if you mentioned this is a fairly conservative industry, that's true, but there's always disruptors. There's disruptors everywhere. We see alternative fuel sources coming in. And as we were talking about earlier, these other fuel sources and the resources that deploy them, there's nobody with better expertise to go deploy those alternative sources than this industry. And if we don't get ahead of that, someone's going to come and disintermediate us, I think, by doing this. And so getting ahead of that by understanding where the optimal temperatures, weather, conditions are, you already have that data for a specific purpose. So again, taking that step back and thinking about how to apply that model to other sources of income is how we enrich our balance sheets. This is ultimately how I think we make more money. And again, we see this across multiple other industries.
That's great. I'm on board with that model. It sounds just tell us how do we implement
How do
it?
we do that? Well, first of all, honestly though, it comes back to understanding that first thing I said, understanding what data we have and try to apply some meaning to it. What does this data mean under these conditions? And then get smart people in the room, business people in the room, technologists in the room, and say, what if we could make money doing this? Do we have the information available to do that? And what would we need to be able to provide that data connectivity layer across all these environments? 10 years ago, we would have said, I've got SCADA systems out in the fields. I get a thumb drive via helicopter from my platforms once a week. That's my data. But now we have reliable satellite comms in many places, or fairly reliable satellite comms. So that means we can be capturing our data in real time, making it part of this. If you guys have heard this concept of a data mesh, right? All of my data systems are connected across all of these different environments. If my data's connected and I can provide some information about that, then we can start making decisions about all of that. I can push intelligence out to that remote rig in real time and help those humans, those highly skilled humans, stay safer and ultimately extract more resources. I think that's how we get started. Understanding the data and then connecting all of those environments together. I think that's how we get started. How you write your algorithms, how you choose to make money, obviously that's a different conversation. But I don't know, does that make sense, Robert?
Oh, it certainly makes sense. And we have to begin. I mean, data is beautiful. And, we just start collecting the data to understand how we utilize it. But I'm really concerned too about the varied localization, the requirements. And one of the ones that I don't think we've really brought up is the cybersecurity threat to that. Was as Mark earlier asked, what are some of the challenges? And I think, okay, we're in silos, we don't share the data, but also inherently we don't want to share the data because it's my data. I've mined the data.
Yep.
Plus, I don't want to be a threat. I don't want my rig to shut down. You talk about the old SCADA drill packages, and you get your flash drive once a week, once a month with the updates. You get the information back. That was pretty secure. You didn't have to worry about as many viruses or as many opportunities to be attacked. But now, as we put more information online, as we're going to share this data, we share it across multiple platforms with the OEMs, with the manufacturing groups, with the downhole guys, with the drilling guys. How do we ensure that this complex system of cybersecurity is addressed?
Yeah, so we have seen a lot of customers, just coming to us. I think even Matt might have been in such conversations wherein they'll come to us and say that we don't want to push our data to cloud. We are not feeling secure. We have certain level of standards which we want to follow, and we don't trust. I don't know what if my data is getting leaked or somebody is trying to grab my data, right? Because with that I can be out of the business as well, right? Sometimes. So for such scenarios itself, we have brought up a lot of architectures and solutions within HPE, wherein we want to secure the data by having it within your premises. We are not asking you to push the data to out of your premises. Have the data, but at least when we are having the data on premises, at least we should trust the different verticals within the own organization. For example, even in oil and gas, right, we'll have multiple sections, right? It's not that one section wherein I'll be using my data only for myself. I have to share the data across the teams. For example, it could be a financial data, or it could be the other reporting data, right? So I have to collect all the data, bring it to one place to make a meaningful insight. So trust, yes. And also, sometimes the question comes to us within HP and within outside the HP from the customers as well, right? Wherein they come and says that, how do I trust this AI system? Because I don't know what it is doing within the black box. It is just a black box for me. It's just taking the input and giving me some output. I don't know what is happening within that. There are algorithms written within it. But how do I trust the outcome, right? So that's where we bring in a lot of ethics, AI principles, and trustworthiness within the AI, what AI is doing. We are trying to bring up the solutions wherein it explains what it is exactly doing within the black box, and how can you trust the decisions and insights, whatever it is bringing out of the table. So I
Yeah.
think
Yeah, well, so I think there's this concept of trust. So back when you had someone fly in a USB drive, you knew the helicopter, you knew the person that was giving you, you could implicitly trust that the information that was being given to you was important. That is extended to cybersecurity in an interesting way. The world is sort of moving towards a I don't trust anything sort of model because of the attacks have gotten so sophisticated. What organizations are doing now as data is being fed on the receiving end, every time it broadcasts, it says, I don't trust you. What are you? And so every time something is sending data, it has to prove to the other side that it is who it says it is. Because again, if we think thousands, tens of thousands of data points all streaming in at once, it'd be really easy for someone to slip an attack in there. And so what we are starting to see now is these systems that are starting to send data. We can take it all the way back to the silicone that was mined from the earth, the load that came out of that mountain, how it was smelted, refined, and put into a processor. That can be part of that trust chain. So that on the other side, there is a unique identifier for the silicone in the chip that says, I am who I say I am. You can trust my data. And it does that every time it sends that out. That's got to be a really important, I know it sounds kind of weird and esoteric, but again, as we start thinking about all of these interconnected layers, we have to think about different ways of trusting those sources. Because ultimately, if we don't have the security in place and we don't trust it, then we're not going to be able to make decisions. People are going to be second guessing this. So having that level of security built into that system, out at the rigs, out at the platforms, in the trucks that the people are driving around, I think that drives additional intelligence into the system. That gives us some degree of trust as we start implementing new technology. So there are capabilities now that are in place that allow us to be able to trust those information sources so we can make those decisions. Does that make sense, Robert?
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that. It's, that is pretty granular, literally, to understand where the chip begins live. And there's a lot of challenges, a lot of hurdles, and I still think back to who wins in all of this. We talk about energy production, we talk about sustainable energy production, we talk about increasing capacity, and I'm just trying to think that there's a lot of hurdles. So why get on board? I mean, as an OEM, I want to understand my equipment, so that's where I want to be on board. As a drilling contractor, you want to lower your capex. That's why you want to be on board. As an operator, you want to increase your profit. You want to lower your capex as well. So really, it seems like through sharing of data, through understanding the process, connecting the lines, everybody wins in this case, and everybody becomes more efficient. Everybody is able to experience the growth through some sort of sharing of data, through some sort of platform, through understanding the process. We're not changing the drilling process. We're still using hoisting equipment, rotating equipment, circulating equipment. We're not changing how it's drilled. We're analyzing it better to understand, which could give us some new capital models, could lower our expenditures, could lower our risk, and ultimately produce hydrocarbons at a lower cost.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's the outcome we want to drive. And so I get asked a question a lot. How do we get started? My environment's going to be a lot different than my competitors or the people upstream or the people downstream. How do I get started with this sort of technology adoption? And there's lots of different patterns the way to do that. What Bruno was saying. Some people prefer to bring all of their data into one place. So move heaven and earth to bring all of our data into a central location. And you're probably already doing that with a lot of your traditional systems. But then putting capabilities in place to start capturing data that you haven't thought about today. So sure, you're capturing weather data, you're capturing satellite data, you're capturing telemetry data in the earth. But what if you started capturing, I don't know, what the people on the rig were talking about? And again, I don't know if that's relevant to the scenario here. And some people may feel like that's an invasion of privacy, but they're your employees. What if some of the conversations they're having in real time while they're drilling could be pertinent to avoid a safety issue? What if you could detect that someone showed up to work less than sober, in real time had them removed from the platform, ultimately avoiding an injury? Well, we hadn't thought about capturing that sort of information. How do we do that? How do we do that in a way that the humans still feel comfortable doing their jobs that way? And again, so again, I don't have the right answer to this, but asking those what if questions allows us to start thinking about the metrics that are driving our businesses. Is it safety? Is it environmental impact? Ultimately, is it the flow of petroleum? Is it the cost we get on the market? What are these different KPIs that we're driving our business towards? And what do we need to support making additional money? So I'll tell you another story. This is the tale of two banks coming out of the Libor scandal back in 2012, 2014. So Barclays got nailed with hundreds of millions in fines because a few of their stock traders were fixing the market to profit. And so Libor is a bank trading standard that says basically that you cannot collude to fix the market around securities tradings. And again, Barclays got absolutely nailed, hundreds of millions of dollars in fines. So a bunch of the banks said, we don't want this to happen. And I spoke to two banks at the time that took very different approaches. The first one was they were going to move heaven and earth to put the technology in place to avoid insider trading, essentially was what they were solving for. So they put a whole bunch of technology in place to solve that one particular problem. And they set up a silo, as we talked about. So that platform now makes sure that there's no insider trading. And that platform runs today and it's working quite successfully. And they update it every 6 months or so. This other bank took a different approach. They said, we don't think that this is going to be the first time the regulators are going to come down on us for these sorts of things. So we want to build a more broader focused platform. Rather than just collect specific information from our traders, we want to start collecting lots of information about our traders. And doing things like every time there's a Microsoft Teams call, they record it. Even if you don't click the record button, in the background, it's being recorded for these folks. Their company cell phones, the documents that they're sending across. And they realized that when they did that, they could not only detect securities fraud, but they could detect a lot of other things that were going on in the organization and optimize their bank around the use of real estate, because they found people were not really using half of the office space for anything productive. So leased it out to somewhere else. And so they found that they could take this project, which was initially a little broad, and turn it into a source of income for them. And I think it's interesting that this one study that they did in, I think it was 2018, they found that all of a sudden there was a bunch of chatter about people ordering sushi rolls. All of a sudden these traders were talking about ordering sushi. And so the system flagged it as an anomaly. They didn't know what was going on. They just knew that people were talking about ordering California rolls at 7 p.m. on a Thursday for the next day. They thought that was a little weird. So they investigated and they realized that these traders were using that as keywords to commit securities fraud. And so it's really strange, right? But because they built this more broader, somewhat less focused system, they were able to identify, again, both areas of revenue as well as areas of optimization that they hadn't defined in that narrow scope like that other bank did. And again, I'm not saying one is better than the other. That first bank, for them, building individual platforms for individual problems is how they do business. That's just how they operate. And that was their comfort level. This other bank was much more comfortable with an open-ended way of solving the problem and the things that might come in the future. And again, when we start talking about hundreds of millions in capital expenses, we probably can't be that open-ended. But again, perhaps shifting the risk and the revenue model allows us to open up our businesses for other ways of making money. So anyway, I like to tell that bank story just because there's not just one way to solve a problem from a technology perspective. There's different approaches we can take, but it depends on the appetite of your organization, your ability to spend money on technology, your risk profile for doing so. Because again, if you try and go against the grain, you're going to fail. So I know that was a little off topic, Robert, but
no, that's great. It's good to hear there's not, we talked about standards and the taxonomy and the standards, but it's good to hear there are multiple approaches that are successful to get to a similar outcome, in this case, securities fraud. But same for us. There's multiple approaches to how we utilize these assets, multiple approaches to how we could look at different business models to capitalize on the technology we've already paid for, the assets we already own, and how do we change? So it's good to hear that you could, there's not one set way. We should continue to drive for, parallel activities.
Yep, that's right. Again, go talk to your technology teams about, is there something that they can optimize to help you make more money instead of just asking them to deliver their service? Is there a way for them to take the information that they already have and turn it into a business? And again, that's a very specific question, but very broad in focus. They may say, I don't know. They may say, we don't have the data. But I talk to a lot of technologists, and there's a lot of churn in the technology space right now. There's, as Buna was saying, a lot of people are moving to cloud. They're talking artificial intelligence. They're talking about all these different technologies. And your technology teams and your technology service providers are starting to think about and trying to stay a couple steps ahead of where you are in your technology adoption. Go have that conversation with them. What can we do if? What if we could X? And see what they say. And if they say, this is the exact way you have to do it, well, I don't think there's always a specific way to solve a problem. But I think as we look to partner with technology and thinking about leveraging data as that asset, I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to again, save money, make money, improve safety, reduce emissions. Well, your presence is
we do need to start winding it down, which I forgot to tell all of y'all. This is live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, all at the same time. You can catch the recording on YouTube. We have a bunch of questions from around the world. Nick and Taylor are going to grab a microphone and start with the online questions. I have one that I caught right here on LinkedIn, and it's directed toward you, Robert. And the question is from a young woman: when did the oil and gas industry become high tech? I had no idea.
That's a great question. We are very high tech, and I think we kind of get, I think people in the media portray us as dirty, as you see these guys on the rig, they're covered in oil. You see this heavy equipment that they're working around, but you got to think of what we're doing. I think the world record well drilled was 7 miles in the lateral position, so we're able to turn and manipulate these big tubulars and put them 10,000 feet in the ground and push them 7 miles long to hit the size of a dinner plate to hit the reservoir. I mean, that's NASA level technology. That's exciting technology. The technology that we develop at NOV to help optimize bit ROP, to help optimize your drilling feet. The technology is there, and I just think it's not publicized enough of what we're actually doing. It is heavy manual work, and so sometimes people see that and go, that's not high tech. But the formations that we're getting to, the areas in the world in which we're drilling at, the conditions in which we are drilling, it's pretty amazing to be able to, we're drilling in 20,000 feet of water at 15,000 psi. I mean, that's remarkable to have that technology there. Again, that's Elon Musk going to the moon technology, but we're doing it here just to extract hydrocarbons safely and efficiently.
Love it. Nick and Taylor, over to you.
How's everyone doing? Great response. Well, guys, thanks for the enthusiasm. As you can tell, we're online live at OGGN on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. And if you're online and you have any questions for the panel, feel free to please comment, and we'll go ahead and ask them. And if you guys are here in person, please feel free, raise your hand. We'll come around and we'll take questions from you guys. Awesome. And what's your name?
Lindsay Farrell.
Lindsay, nice to meet you. What do you have to ask?
Nice to meet you. Do you mind? So I hear you guys talking about the, myriad ways that we can get to some of these answers, but some of the common themes I heard were, okay, data provenance. So who owns what? Where did it come from? Who has access to it? Data interoperability. So what systems can this information speak to? Data privacy, because we want to keep things proprietary that are proprietary. Rather than trying to reinvent the wheel and come up with all brand new solutions, why do we not have more of our industry embracing things like Hyperledger blockchain? Because that's really encompasses all of those things in a nutshell. And what are your organizations doing in the blockchain space, and specifically Hyperledger?
Yeah, so I'll go first on that one. I do see adoption of Hyperledger specifically in oil and gas. It tends to be the larger organizations, the integrated providers that are driving that. Well, we're on the standards body or the part of the standards organization that's helping to define that. blockchain is a it's an interesting word, right? Because it gets people a little freaked out. They're thinking, is that Bitcoin? Am I mining Bitcoin? I'm with it. So getting over some of the biases, I think, is one of the initial challenges with that. But in terms of adopting that as a way to track, ensure privacy, residency, provenance, I think it makes perfect sense. I think you're on the right track. Doing that at scale, I think it requires the application of right-sized technology. And again, as we think about deploying that technology to all of these sites, it comes back to, what is this costing me? Why is it costing me that? And what value does it add? Just because I can trace the data from, and what the data means from where it was created doesn't necessarily mean I'm getting value. So we have a sort of a cart before the horse, or a chicken and an egg problem. A lot of organizations are not answering the question of what value am I going to get by doing this. They just see technology vendors saying, do this, it'll cost this, and maybe something will come down the road. We've got to flip that, right? We've got to get to the business problem we're solving first, then we can figure out exactly what technology to provide.
To add to Matt, right? So there is another aspect to it, right? It's more of maturity level. If you think of data, technology, AI, it's been existing from years ago. And then now it is coming into the play wherein people started adopting it and coming to a smarter generation. And also to add to, when did oil and gas shifted to, high tech? Yes, humans are going to be controlled by machines. I can see that today, right? Alexa is doing most of my work. I'll just use my phone and say, I want to turn on the light in my home. My phone will do the work for me. So technology is controlling, and how long we can be behind the technology, right? So we have to adapt technology. And coming back to the blockchain, right? So when we talk to the customers about the blockchain, so whenever I say a blockchain, the first word comes to the customer mind is Bitcoin. Are you talking about Bitcoin? It's more of maturity and adaptability. I think it's going to take some more time for organization, business people to understand what exactly it is and how we can achieve it. And then, yeah, definitely HP has a play within blockchain, but it is, adoption is still slow. So we are running with a market pace.
I would just say to encourage everyone in this room then to follow along with that maturity curve and help it move forward. We're not talking about Bitcoin. We're talking about how we use and manage and share data. And there's lots of examples outside of our industry where blockchain and specifically Hyperledger has worked well. If we can't make it work in our own industry, perhaps that's a reflection of our own shortcomings and not necessarily of blockchain. That's all.
Great. Thanks, Lizzie. Awesome, guys. Well, let's get involved. Who wants to ask a question? I got Craig over here. How you doing, Craig?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing pretty good.
I have so many questions, but my question for you guys is, as the industry has changed, we have a different level of both age and experience in the industry, right? And the people that came up in the days of spending years in a training program, learning every single thing, now people are coming out of school, going into what they do, and that's kind of what they know. They don't know everything. So what are y'all's organizations doing to have that experience level that's been there, done that? It's not a machine, it's not a widget, it's not a plant. A well is a living, breathing thing with data and information, and some of it is knowledge base and experience that's not just in data, but on y'all's teams, do you have any gray-haired experienced guys that have worked all over a certain area and immediately can give you a chance of what direction to go somewhere? What are you guys doing to address that? Would be my question.
Do you want to go first?
I'll let you go first.
I'll take this one first. What I see across a lot of industries, and this exact question is common across every industry. As people have retired out, you've got new people coming in, but they're very specialized. What I see successful organizations doing is deploying some of the technology that these younger people are most comfortable with as the platform they use to initially interface with whatever it is they're doing, whether it's medicine, finance, or resource extraction. I see organizations creating TikToks as educational videos. Instead of the standard educational programs, it's being delivered via TikTok because that's where people are most comfortable. And it's on a tablet or it's a mobile device. It's not, here's your PC in a cubicle. It's, here's your device, and it syncs across all of these. That's how modern workers coming out of university, coming out of certificate programs, expect to interact with the organization. And I see a tremendous amount of churn in organizations where people say, these people are forcing me to use a tool and a system that's 15 years old. I'm not here for that. There goes somewhere else. And so retaining talent is probably the number one issue that I hear from my clients across every industry. And it's those companies that are willing to meet those workers at least halfway on some of the tools to get them involved in that. And then again, pairing them with mentors, having training, that all comes with it. But it may sound silly, but organizations that do that are the ones that have better retention than those that don't.
Absolutely. It's using the tools. And you're right, retention is a big problem. I hear from a lot of the contractors specifically that they've spent the money on the assets. They've spent the money on the maintenance. They've done the hard work from the capital side, but they just don't have enough people to put the rigs back to work. If I could get more people, I could put the same assets already owned back to work. So we're addressing that by changing what a drill floor could look like. We're going to introduce robotics to the industry start at the end of this year. And we're not looking to replace people. We're looking to enhance the operations that people do on a drilling rig, and maybe change some of the skill sets of the people that are on the drilling rig now. And attract people to go, we are the high tech industry that's out there. We're not just a bunch of dirty people on the rig floor throwing around chains and picking up this heavy tubular. And no, we're using other technology to help. So we're addressing that gap on the rig personality gap with new technologies, with robotics. And then for us personally to send service technicians out, we're looking at some visualization technology, some glassware that they could see the service manuals, they can see the repair operations. They're in remote contact with the experienced guys back here at the repair facilities. And so we're leveraging that technology, as well as we're adapting what the workforce looks like, what the workday looks like, what the working from home situation, utilizing more digital platforms, having more digital meetings, and all in the endeavor to attract more and more people to our side, the manufacturer side, and then to be able to help our customers, the drilling contractors in particular, be able to put their assets back to work.
Yeah, we're doing it right now. So normally it just would have been people here in this room that would gather this information. We're all over the world in real time right now. So the world's changing, we just have to change with it.
Thanks, Greg. Awesome. See you over. Oh, sorry. How's it going?
Howdy.
Kyle.
Howdy. Kyle with Texas Quality. And, think a lot of folks that are outside the oil and gas industry don't realize how much of the work is often done by smaller contractors. So while, yes, the project is assigned to one larger organization, it often is the case that 90% of the personnel that are there are for completely independent contractors, oftentimes less than 100, less than even 50 and 10 employees. So when we're talking about sharing data, it's fantastic within an organization you can control. How do you propose disseminating the information to other smaller contractors whose next customer does it totally differently?
Yeah, it's about providing that consistent experience.
Yes.
I've seen this in other industries where there's lots of contractors and there's sort of a chain, a process or a chain going from one to one. And what's interesting is, I think especially about this space, is depending where you are in that workflow, it's a very different experience. And I don't want to say that technology is the answer for everything, but we've got to provide a consistent information experience for each of those, which requires people to enter the data. And I think, I don't know who's worse. I don't know if it's folks in the field working on this or doctors in medical facilities. Data collection is atrocious. It just is. Humans don't want to do it. They want to scribble their notes and they want to move on. So maybe we can get them to scribble their notes on a tablet instead of a piece of paper. And then we can outsource how that gets translated and turned into data. And I'm telling you, it's ugly. But if you force people to do things too radically different than the way they're doing, they just won't. Humans will always optimize around things that are inconvenient, even if they're paid to do it. So providing that crutch, if you will, you've got to go that extra mile to make their jobs easier across that experience. And so each of the subs has to use this app. They have to use the My Field app or whatever the case is going to be. And then lowering that barrier to entry. It's got to work every time. It's got to be consistent, and it needs to add a little bit of value for them too. I think that's the way you optimize that.
And that's the last question. Sorry, everybody else had questions. So round of applause for our panelists. I think this was incredible. Can the HPE members step down? Robert, you have 2 minutes to finish your meal over there. And can I get the rest of the HPE there in the audience to come up on stage, please? And can I get a representative from the API board other than myself? Everybody pull your cameras out. Oh, and I need Andrew with U of H up here, please. Don't we have somebody from University of Houston? Oh, here she comes. All right, so on behalf of API Houston Chapter HPE, thank you very much for your donation. This money is going to help some kids in college. We appreciate everything y'all have done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you once again to our sponsor today, and thank you for University of Houston for coming over today too. This goes a long way towards our scholarship fund, so thank you very much. I also want to thank the panelists today. We hit everything from F1, which is my personal favorite, to insider trading and then the blockchain. This is certainly a very unique day. I absolutely love it, so I'm really grateful that you all are here. And again, thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to everyone who is here today. I think it was really a great way to start the new season. There's a lot of great programming coming up, a lot of big events coming up. And then I guess we'll see you at the next couple of events. See us on our website. Thank you to everyone who watched online, and we'll do it again. Thank you guys. Have a great day.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for being here. We enjoyed the event, and we hope to see you next time.